My goal for each chapter was to center it around the gospel. So if nothing else, after you're done with that chapter, you heard the gospel. If nothing else, because that's where our identity is, that's the center of it. And so when I was talking, I was like, Lord, if nothing else, if someone reads this, they get the gospel. And that was kind of the baseline for me. um, but as you were talking, I think of, I wrote a chapter called Gentle. And one of the examples I give is when we were kids, we would have this huge Christmas Eve um, get together at one of the aunts' house. And I come from a Hispanic family. And so it was huge. And I don't know if any of you have like older Hispanic women friends or are in that community, but they are loud and there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of banging going on. There's like really aggressive hugging. And I took that example and I turned it into the example of gentle, given the scriptures. Like, you don't have to, you're not defined by those things. Those women were still very gentle to me. And they were still, because there was identity that was rooted in Jesus. And so I think that is a good example of how you can take something like, hey, you don't, just because you are maybe a little bit more aggressive than the person next to you, than the woman next to you, or you parent different or you mother different, and you don't want to own gentle. Jesus gave us the very spirit that allows us to be gentle, that gives us that characteristic, which means that characteristic is not based on how hard my hugs are or how loud I am.
Mm. Yeah, so good. There is a feminine way to think about these things, and I think that the reason why I think this is so difficult for modern women is that there has been this sort of cultural shift that's been created by feminism, which has seemed to be, hey, we're going to equalize men and women and require women to compete and try to become, with men to try to become a better man. And so a lot of these characteristics need to be nested inside of motherhood. And once they're inside of motherhood and sort of purged of sort of this androgynous nature, like, no, there is a female motherly way to express gentleness, and it's going to have a range that's unique within femininity. That gives tremendous freedom. You don't have to compete with men. You don't have to let men set the standard for what gentleness is. It doesn't exist necessarily within that spectrum. It's its own thing. And you see this in ancient cultures. I love that you're calling it out, Annalisa, like in a Hispanic culture where there hasn't really been infected with these kinds of ideas. You see it very uniquely lived out in that culture, and it isn't necessarily something that looks or feels both masculine and feminine. It's just the way that women, at the spectrum that is unique inside of motherhood or inside of femininity. And yeah, I think that when we're parenting, fathering, and mothering daughters, for them to get to see that's such an incredible advantage, just to be able to be in a multi-generational family and see that whole spectrum within your family, to see the mothers and grandmothers, and the way that they live out, these character qualities. That's such a powerful picture.